Hello, reading room. How are you? This is Dr. Annette Feravich. I won't check out there to see if I have the book yet because it's like a scam for people who can't see very well and are ready to go skating on their back on that stair, on those stairs. Complete glare ice out there. What's going on? That we can't what? Looks like there's enough people living here. I don't know. But then again, if I don't know, that's not really saying much. All right, that's not what I wanted to do. I want this. I want this. I want this. Okay, we are on book 5. So let's look at book 5. Oh, that's not what we want. And yes, it's already opened up. Oh, hey. Okay, so book 5, The Grand Canyon. He returns to argument. He returns to an attempt at living according to his moral ideals. He knows that Christianity promises assistance in this attempt, but refuses through fear to examine the question. And though his conscience invites him to higher endeavors, he embraces a common sense ideal of cultured, humane, enlightened hedonism. Such an ideal, however, has no room for the desire that still haunts him. He is disgusted at its heartlessness, and he discovers that its plausibility depends on externals. It is a philosophy that takes for granted a comfortable income and a good digestion. Not by road and foot, nor by sail and ocean shalt thou find any course that reaches the world beyond the north. Pindar. The ephemerals have no help to give. Behold them. They are deedless and cripple like to a dream. The kind of mortals is bound with a chain, and their eyes are in darkness. Aeschylus. Alas, what can they teach and not mislead? Ignorant of themselves, of God, much more, and how the world began and how man fell. Milton. I looked that up once. I'm going to read it single paged. It's just too hard to keep it consistently sounding like it should. And that's for you, since I'm still here. Yeah, so I can't look for my book out in the mailbox because it's glare ice out there. That's why I brought that up. Chapter 1, The Grand Canyon. The main road soon began to ascend, and after a short climb, John found himself on a bleak tableland, which continued to rise before him, but at a gentler angle. After he had walked a mile or so, he saw the figure of a man ahead, outlined against the setting sun. At first the figure stood still, then it took a few paces to the left and to the right, as if in indecision. Then it turned about to face him, and to his surprise hailed him as an old acquaintance. Because of the light in his face, John could not at first see who it was, and they had joined hands before he knew that it was Virtue. "What can have delayed you?" cried John. "I thought by your pace when I left you that you would have been a week's journey ahead of me by now." "If you think that," said Virtue, "your way must have been easier than mine. Have you not crossed mountains?" "I came through a pass," said John. "The main road took them without a bend," said Virtue, "and I often made scarcely 10 miles a day, but that does not signify. I have learned something of climbing and sweated off a good deal of soft flesh. What has really delayed me is this: I have been here for several days." With that he motioned John to proceed, and they went forward together to the brow of the slope. Then I saw John start back a pace or so with a cry, for he had found that he stood on the edge of a precipice. Then presently he reapproached it with caution and looked. He saw that the road ran up without warning to the edge of a great gorge or chasm, and ended in the air as if it had been broken off. The chasm might be 7 miles wide, and as for its length, it stretched southward on his left and northward on his right as far as he could see. The sun shining in his face cast all the further side into shadow, so that he could not see much of it clearly. It seemed to him, however, a rich country from the verdure and the size of the trees. "I've been exploring the cliffs," said Virtue, "and I think we could get halfway down. Come a little nearer, you see the ledge." "I have a very poor head for heights," said John. "That one," said Virtue, pointing to a narrow strip of greenery 1,000 feet below them. "I could never reach it." "Oh, you could reach that easily enough. The difficulty is to know what happens beyond it. I am inclined to think that it overhangs as though we could get down to it. I am not sure that we could get back if the rest of the descent was impracticable. Then it would be madness to trust ourselves so far." "I don't know about that. It would be in accordance with the rule." "What rule?" "The rule is," said Virtue, "that if we have one chance out of 100 of surviving, we must..." What? "Attempt it. But if we have none, absolutely none, then it would be self-destruction, and we need not." "It is no rule of mine," said John, "but it is. We all have the same set of rules, really, you know. If it is a rule of mine, it is one that I cannot obey." "I don't think I understand you," said Virtue, "but of course you may be such a bad climber that you wouldn't have even one chance. That would make a difference, I allow." Then a third voice spoke. "You have neither of you any chance at all unless I carry you down." Both the young men turned at the sound. An old woman was settled in a kind of rocking chair at the very edge of the precipice. "Oh, it's you, Mother Kirk, is it?" said Virtue, and added in an undertone to John, "I have seen her about the cliffs more than once. Some of the country people say she is second-sighted, and some say she is crazy." "I shouldn't trust her," said John in the same tone. "She looks to me much more like a witch." Then he turned to the old woman and said aloud, "And how could you carry us down, Mother? We would be more fit to carry you." "I could do it, though," said Mother Kirk, "by the power that the landlord has given me." "So you believe in the landlord, too," said John. "How can I not, dear?" said she, "when I am his own daughter-in-law." "He does not give you very fine clothes," said John, glancing at the old woman's country cloak. "They'll last my time," said the old woman placidly. "We ought to try her," whispered Virtue to John. "As long as there is any chance, we are not allowed to neglect it." But John frowned at him to be silent and addressed the old woman again. "Do you not think this landlord of yours is a very strange one?" he said. "How so?" she said. "Why does he make a road like this running up to the very edge of a precipice, unless it is to encourage travelers to break their necks in the dark?" "Oh, bless you, he never left it like that," said the old woman. "It was a good road all round the world when it was new, and all this gorgeous far later than the road." "You mean," said Virtue, "that there has been some sort of cataclysm?" "Well," said Mother Kirk, "I see there will be no getting you down tonight, so I may as well tell you the story. Come and sit down by me. You are neither of you so wise that you need be ashamed of listening to an old wives' tale." Chapter 2, Mother Kirk's Story. When they were seated, the old woman told the following story. "You must know that once upon a time there were no tenants in this country at all, for the landlord used to farm it himself. There were only the animals, and the landlord used to look after them, he and his sons and his daughters. Every morning they used to come down from the mountains and milk the cows and lead out the sheep to pasture, and they needed less watching, for all the animals were tamer then, and there were no fences needed, for if a wolf got in among the flocks, he would do them no harm. And one day the landlord was going home from his day's work when he looked round on the country and the beasts and saw how the crops were springing, and it came into his head that the whole thing was too good to keep to himself. So he decided to let the country to the tenants. And his first tenants was a young married man. But first the landlord made a farm in the very center of the land, where the soil was the best and the air most wholesome, and that was the very spot where you are sitting now. They were to have the whole land, but that was too much for them to keep under cultivation. The landlord's idea was that they could work the farm and leave the rest as a park for the time being, but later they could divide the park up into holdings for their children. For you must know that he drew up a very different lease from the kind you have nowadays. It was a lease in perpetuity on his side, for he promised never to turn them out, but on their side they could leave when they chose, as long as one of their sons was there to take the farm on, and then they could go up and live with him in the mountains. He thought that would be a good thing, because it would broaden the minds of his own mountain children to mix with strangers, and they thought so too. But before he put the tenants in possession, there was one thing he had to do. Up to the time the mountain had been full of a certain fruit which the landlord had planted for the refreshment of himself and his children. If they were thirsty during the day as they worked down here, it was a very good fruit, and up in the mountains they say it was even more plentiful. But it is very strong, and only those who are mountain bred ought to eat it, for only they can digest it properly. Hitherto, while there were only beasts in the land, it had done no harm for these mountain apples to be growing in every thicket, for you know that an animal will eat nothing but what is good for it. But now that there were to be men in the land, the landlord was afraid that they might do themselves an injury, yet it was not to be thought of that he should dig up every sapling of that tree and make the country into a desert. So he decided that it was best to be frank with the young people, and when he found a great big mountain apple tree growing in the very center of the farm, he said, "So much the better. If they are to learn sense, they may as well learn it from the beginning, and if they will not, there's no help for it. For if they did not find mountain apples on the farm, they would soon find them somewhere else." So he left the apple tree standing and put the man and his wife into their farm. But before he left them, he explained the whole affair to them, as much of it could be explained, and warned them on no account to eat any of the apples. Then he went home, and for a time the young man and his wife behaved very well, tending the animals and managing their farm, and abstaining from the mountain apples, and for all I knew, they might never never have done otherwise if the wife had not somehow made a new acquaintance. This new acquaintance was a landowner himself. He had been born in the mountains and was one of the landlord's own children, but he had quarreled with his father and set up on his own, and now had built up a very considerable estate in another country. His estate marches, however, with this country, and as he was a great land grabber, he always wanted to take this bit in, and he has very nearly succeeded. I've never met any tenants of his, said John. Not tenants in chief, my dear, said the old woman, and so you didn't know them, but you may have met the Cleavers, who are the tenants of Mr. Mammon, and he is a tenant of the spirit of the age, who holds directly of the enemy. I am sure the Cleavers would be very surprised, said John, to hear that they had a landlord at all. They would think this enemy, as you call him, no less a superstition than your landlord. But that isn't how business is managed, said Mother Kirk. The little people do not know the big people to whom they belong. The big people do not intend that they should. No important transference of property could be carried out if all the small people at the bottom knew what was really happening. But this is not part of my story. As I was saying, the enemy got to know the farmer's wife, and however he did it, or whatever he said to her, it wasn't long before he persuaded her that the one thing she needed was a nice mountain apple, and she took one and ate it. And then you know how it is with husbands. She made the farmer come round to her mind, and at the moment he put out his hand and plucked the fruit, there was an earthquake, and the country cracked open all the way across from north to south. And ever since, instead of the farm, there has been this gorge, which the country people call the Grand Canyon. But in my language, its name is Peccatum a Day. Chapter 3, the self-sufficiency of virtue. And I suppose, said John sourly, the landlord was so annoyed that it was then he invented the rules and the black hole. The story is not quite so simple as that, said the old woman. So many things happened after the eating of the apple. For one thing, the taste created such a craving in man and the woman that they thought they could never eat enough of it. And they were not content with all the wild apple trees, but planted more and more and grafted mountain apple onto every kind of tree, so that every fruit should have a dash of that taste in it. They succeeded so well that the whole vegetation system of the country is now infected, and there is hardly a fruit or a root in the land, certainly none this side of the canyon, that has not a little mountain apple in it. You have never tasted anything that was quite free from it. And what has that got to do with the card of rules? Said John. Everything, said Mother Kirk. In a country where all the food is more or less poisoned, but some of it very much less than more, you need very complicated rules indeed to keep healthy. Meanwhile, said Virtue, we are not getting on with our journey. I will carry you down in the morning if you like, said Mother Kirk. Only mind you, it is dangerous. It is a dangerous place, and you must do exactly as I tell you. If the place is so dangerous, began John, when Virtue, who had been struck by the woman's last words, suddenly broke in. I'm afraid it is no use, Mother, he said. I cannot put myself under anyone's orders. I must be the captain of my soul and the master of my fate. But thank you for your offer. You are right, said John hastily, and added in a whisper, the old creature is clearly insane. Our real business is to explore this chasm north and south until we find some place where the descent is practicable. Virtue had risen. We are thinking, Mother, he said, that we should like to make sure for ourselves that there is no place where we cannot get down without being carried. You see, my own legs have served me so far, and I should not like to start being carried now. It will do you no harm to try, answered Mother Kirk, and I should not wonder if you find a way down. Getting up the other side is another question, to be sure, but perhaps we shall meet again when it comes to that. By this time it was quite dark. The two young men bade good night to the woman and drew back along the main road to discuss their plans. Two byroads branched off from it about a quarter of a mile from the precipice. And as that which went to the north seemed rather the better, and also pointed a little backward and away from the cliffs, which John was anxious not to skirt in the darkness, they turned northward. It was a fine starlit night and grew colder as they proceeded. Chapter 4, Mr. Sensible. When they had walked rather more than a mile, John drew Virtue's attention to a light a little back from the road, and I saw them follow it till they came to a gateway, and after that to a door, and there they knocked. "Whose house is this?" said Virtue, when the servant opened to them. "This is Mr. Sensible's house," said the servant, "and if you are benighted travelers, he will receive you gladly." Then he brought them into a room where a lamp was burning clearly but not very brightly, and an old gentleman was seated by a blazing wood fire with his dog at his feet and his book on his knees and a jigsaw puzzle at one side of him spread out on a wooden frame, and on the other a chessboard with the pieces set for a problem. He rose to greet them very cordially but not hastily. "You are very welcome," said Mr. Sensible. "Pray come and warm yourselves. Drudge," and here he called to the servant, "make some supper ready for three, the usual supper, Drudge. I shall not be able to offer you luxury, gentlemen. The wine of my own country, cowslip wine, shall be your drink. It will be rough to your palate, but to mine the drought that I owe to my own garden and my own kitchen will always have a flavor beyond hypocrisy. The radishes also of my own growing, I think I may venture up to praise, but I see by your looks that I have already betrayed my foible. I confess that my garden is my pride, but what then? We are all children, and I reckon him the wisest among us that can make most sport out of the toys suitable to that condition without seeking to go beyond it. Regum equabit opus animus. Contentment, my friends, contentment is the best riches. Do not let the dog tease you, sir. He is mange. Down. Rover, alas, Rover, thou little knowest that sentence is passed upon thee. You are surely not going to destroy him, sir, said John. He begins to ail, said Mr. Sensible, and it would be foolish to keep him longer. What would you? He has lain in the sun and hunted fleas enough, and now, poor fellow, he must go. All right, I'm not trying that. We must take life on the terms it is given us. You will miss your old companion. Why, as to that, you know, the great art of life is to moderate our passions. Objects of affection are like other belongings. We must love them enough to enrich our lives while we have them, not enough to impoverish our lives when they are gone. You see this puzzle here? While I'm engaged on it, it seems to me of sovereign importance to fit the pieces together. When it is done, I think of it no more, and if I should fail to do it, why I would not break my heart. Confound that, Drudge. Hi, whoreson, are we to wait all night for our supper? Coming, sir, said Drudge from the kitchen. I think the fellow goes to sleep over his pots and pans, said Mr. Sensible, but let us occupy the time by continuing our conversation. Good conversation, I reckon, among the finer sweets of life, but I would not include diatribe or lecturing or persistent discussion under that head. Your doctrine is the bane of all talk. As I sit here listening to your opinions and following the ball wherever it rolls, I defy system. I love to explore your minds. Nothing comes amiss. Chance is, after all, our best guide. Need I call a better witness than the fortunate cast of the dice which has brought you beneath my roof tonight? It wasn't exactly chance, said Virtue, who had been restlessly waiting to speak. We are on a journey, and we are looking for a way to cross the Grand Canyon. All right, you see. You do not insist on my accompanying you. We hadn't thought of it, said John. Why then, I am very willing that you should go, cried Mr. Sensible with a burst of melodious laughter. And yet to what end? I often amuse myself with speculating on that curious restlessness in the mind which drives us, especially in youth, to climb up a mountain merely in order that we may then climb down, or to cross the seas in order that we may pay an innkeeper for setting before us worse cheer than we might eat in our own home, in our own house. Not that I would repress the impulse, you understand, any more than I would starve any other part of my nature. Here again, the secret of happiness lies in knowing where to stop. A moderate allowance of traveling, enough to quiet without satiating a liberal curiosity, is very well. One brings back a few rarities to store in one's inner cabinet against a dull day. But the Grand Canyon, surely a modest tour along the cliffs on this side of it, would give you much the same sort of scenery and save your necks. It wasn't scenery we were looking for, said John. I'm trying to find the island in the west. You refer, no doubt, to some aesthetic experience. There again, I would not urge a young man to shut his eyes to that sort of thing, who has not felt immortal longings at the lengthening of the shadow or the turning of the leaf, who has not stretched out his hand for the ultimate shore. We have all been fools once, aye, and are glad to have been fools too. But our imaginations, like our appetites, need discipline, not, heaven help us, in the interest of any transcendental ethic, but in the interest of our own solid good. The wild impulse must be tasted, not obeyed. The bees have stings, but we rob them of their honey. To hold all that urgent sweetness to our lips, the cup of one perfect moment, missing no faintest ingredient in the flavor of its whatever that is, yet ourselves in a sense unmoved, that is the true art. This tames in the service of the reasonable life even those pleasures whose loss might seem to be the heaviest yet necessary price we paid for rationality. Is it an audacity to hint that for the corrected palate, the taste of the drought even owes its last sweetness to the knowing that we have wrested it from an unwilling source? To cut off pleasure from the consequences and conditions which they have by nature, detaching, as it were, the precious phrase from its irrelevant context, is what distinguishes the man from the brute and the citizen from the savage. I cannot join with those moralists who inveigh against the Roman emetics in their banquets, still less with those who would forbid the even more beneficent contraceptive devices of our later times. The man who can eat as taste, not nature, prompts him, and yet fear no aching belly, or who can indulge in Venus and fear no impertinent bastard, is a civilized man. In him I recognize urbanity, the note of the center. The note of the center. Do you know of any way across the canyon? Said Virtue abruptly. I do not, said the host, for I have never made inquiries. The proper study of mankind is man, and I have always left useless speculations alone. Suppose that there were a way across, to what purpose should I use it? Why should I scramble down this side and up the other to find after my labors the same soil still beneath me and the same heaven above? It would be laughable to suppose that the country beyond the gorge can be any different from the country on this side of it. Nature has already done all she can for our comfort and amusement, and the man who does not find content at home will seek it vainly abroad. Confound that fellow, drudge. Will you bring us our supper, or do you prefer to have every bone in your body broken? Coming, sir, said Drudge from the kitchen. There might be different people on the other side of the canyon, suggested John in the momentary pause that followed. That is even less likely, said Mr. Sensible. Human nature is always the same. The dress and the manners may vary, but I detect the unchanging heart beneath the shifting disguises. If there are men beyond the canyon, rest assured that we know them already. They are born and they die, and in the interval between they are the same lovable rascals that we know at home. Still, said John, you can't really be certain that there is no such place as my island. Reason left it an open question. Reason, exclaimed Mr. Sensible. Do you mean mad woman who goes riding about the country dressed up in armor? I trust that when I spoke of the reasonable life, you did not think that I meant anything under her auspices. There is a strange confusion in our language here, for the reasonableness which I commend has no more dangerous enemy than reason. Perhaps I should drop the use of the name altogether and say that my deity has not reason but le bon sens. What is the difference, said Virtue. Sense is easy, reason is hard. Sense knows where to stop with gracious inconsistency, while reason slavishly follows an abstract logic whither she knows not. The one seeks comfort and finds it, the other seeks truth and is still seeking. Le bon sens is the farther of the flourishing family. Reason is barren and a virgin. If I had my way, I should clap this reason of yours in the bridewell, to pursue her meditations in the straw. The baggage has a pretty face, I allow, but she leads us from our true aim, joy, pleasure, ease, content, whatever the name. She is a fantastic who has never learned from my master to pursue the golden mean, and being a mortal to think mortal thoughts. It is very odd that you should say that, interrupted Virtue, for I was also brought up on Aristotle, but I think my text must have differed from yours. In mine, the doctrine of the mean does not bear the sense you have given it at all. He specially says that there is no excess of goodness. You cannot go too far in the right direction. The line that we should follow may start from the middle point in the base of a triangle, but the further off the apex is, the better in that dimension. Dominus, broke out Mr. Sensible. Spare us the rest, young man. We are not at a lecture, and I readily admit that your scholarship is more recent than mine. Philosophy should be our mistress, not our master, and the pursuit of a pedantic accuracy amidst the freedom of our social pleasures is as unwelcome as, and the bit about thinking mortal thoughts, continued Virtue, whose social experience, as I dreamed, was not extensive. The bit about mortal thoughts was quoted by Aristotle to say that he disagreed with it. He held that the end of mortal life was to put on immortality as much as might be. And he also said that the most useless of studies was the noblest. I see you are a letter perfect, young man, said Mr. Sensible with a rather chilly smile, and I am sure these pieces of information, if repeated to your teachers, would win the applause they deserve. Here, if you will forgive me, they are a little out of place. A gentleman's knowledge of the ancient authors is not that of a pedant, and I think you have misunderstood the place which philosophy ought to hold in the reasonable life. We do not memorize systems, what systems can stand, what system does not leave us with the old refrain. There's the old refrain. It is in her power to remind us of the strangeness of things in the brown charm of her secluded meditations, above all in her decorative function, that philosophy becomes instrumental to the good life. We go to the porch and the academy to be the spectators, not partisans. Drudge! Dinner is served, sir, said Drudge, appearing at the door. Then I dreamed that they went into the dining room and so to table. Chapter 5, Table Talk. The cowslip wine came with the oysters. It was a little rough, as the old gentleman had prophesied, and the glasses were so very small that Virtue drained his at once. John was afraid that there might be no more to come, and therefore dallied over his, partly because he feared that he might put his host out of countenance, and partly because he disliked the taste. But his precautions were needless, for with the soup came sherry. I hope that this wild garden vintage is not unpleasing to an unspoiled palate. You don't mean to say that you have vines, exclaimed John. I was referring to the cowslip wine, said Mr. Sensible. I hope to have some good vines soon, but at present I still rely a little on my neighbors. Is this our own sherry, Drudge? No, sir, said Drudge. This is that lot that Mr. Broad sent. Halibut, said John. You surely don't. No, said Mr. Sensible. Sea fish, I confess. I must get from my friends on the coast. As the meal went on, John's good manners forbade him to make further inquiries, and when a salad came with 1 or 2 small radishes in it, he was positively relieved that his host should be able to claim them as his own produce. His humble sauce, a radish or an egg, said Mr. Sensible. But in my dream, I was privileged to know the source of the whole meal. The cowslip wine and the radishes were homegrown. The joint had been a present from Mr. Mammon. The entrees and savories came from Escropolis. The champagne and ices from Mr. Halfway's. Some of the food was part of the stores which Mr. Sensible had taken over when he came to live there from his predecessors who had occupied this house before him, for on that tableland, and especially to the north of the main road, the air is so tight and cold that things keep for a long time. The bread, the salt, and the apples had been left by Epicurus, who was the builder of the house and its first inhabitant. Some very fine hock had belonged to Horace. The claret, and also, as I remember, most of the silver were Montanese. But the port, which was 1 in 1,000, and the best thing on that table, had once belonged to Rabelais, who in his turn had it as a present from old Mother Kirk when they were friends. Then I dreamed that after dinner, old Mr. Sensible stood up and made a little speech in Latin, thanking the landlord for all they had received. Who, said John, do you believe in the landlord? What, said John, do you believe in the landlord? No part of our nature is to be suppressed, said Mr. Sensible, least of all a part that has enshrined itself in beautiful traditions. The landlord has his function, like everything else, as one element in the good life. Then presently Mr. Sensible, who was turning very red, fixed his eyes intently on John and repeated, as one element, as one element. I see, said John, and there was a long silence. As well, began Mr. Sensible with great energy some 10 minutes later, it is part of good manners. My dear Mr. Virtue, my dear young friend, your glass is quite empty. I mean absolutely empty. There was another and longer pause. John began to wonder whether Mr. Sensible were not asleep, when suddenly Mr. Sensible, and with great conviction, then he smiled and at them and finally went to sleep. And presently Drudge came in, looking old and thin and dirty in the pale morning light, for I thought that the dawn was just then beginning to show through the chinks of the shutters to carry his master to bed. Then I saw him come back and lead the guests to their beds. And then the third time I saw him come back into the dining room and pour out the remains of the claret into a glass and drink it off. Then he stood for a moment or so, blinking his red eyes and rubbing his bony, stubbly chin. At last he yawned and set about tidying the room for breakfast. Chapter 6, Drudge. I dreamed that John awoke feeling cold. The chamber in which he lay was luxuriously furnished, and all the house was silent, and that John thought it would be useless to rise, and piled all his clothes on him, and tried to sleep again. But he only grew colder. Then he said to himself, even if there is no chance of breakfast, I may save myself from freezing by walking about. So he rose and huddled on all his clothes, and went down to the house, but the fires were not yet lit. Finding the back door open, he went out. It was full morning of a gray, sunless day. There was dark clouds fairly low, and as John came out, one snowflake fell at his feet, but no more. He found that he was in Mr. Sensible's garden, but it was more of a yard than a garden. A high wall ran all about it, and all within the wall was dry brown earth with a few stony paths. Dibbling the earth with his foot, John found that the soil was only half an inch deep. Under it was solid rock. A little way from the house, he found Drudge down on his hands and knees, scraping together what seemed to be a little pile of dust. But it was in fact the soil of the garden. The little pile had been got together at the cost of leaving the rock uncovered for a big circle, like a bald patch all around Drudge. Good morning, Drudge, said John. What are you making? Radish beds, sir. Your master is a great gardener. Talks about it, sir. Does he not work in the garden himself? No, sir. It is a poor soil here. Does he manage to feed himself on his own produce in a good year? Feeds me on it, sir. What does the garden grow besides radishes? Nothing, sir. John passed on the end of the garden and looked over the wall, which was lower here. He drew back with a little start, for he found that he was looking down an abyss. The garden was perched on the edge of the Grand Canyon. Below John's feet, at the bottom of the gorge, lay the forest, and on the opposite side he saw a mixture of wood and cliff. The cliffs were all shaggy with trailing and hanging greenery, and streams, rendered immovable to sight by their distance, came down from the land beyond. Even on that cold morning, the farther side looked richer and warmer than his own. We must get out of this, said John. At that moment, Drudge called to him. I shouldn't lean on that wall, sir, he said. There's frequent landslides. Landslides? Yes, sir. I've rebuilt that wall a dozen times. The house used to be right out here, halfway across the gorge. The canyon is getting wider then? At this point, sir, in Mr. Epicurus's time. You have been employed here under other masters then? Yes, sir. I've seen a good many of them. Whoever has lived here has always needed me. Chirija, they used to call me in the old days, but now they just call me Drudge. Tell me about your old masters, said John. Mr. Epicurus was the first. Mental case he was. Poor gentleman. He had a chronic fear of black hole. Something dreadful. I never had a better employer, though. Nice, kind, quiet-spoken sort of man. I was very sorry when he went down the cliff. Goodness me, exclaimed John. Do you mean that some of your masters have lost their lives in these landslides? Most of them, sir. At that moment, a leonine roar came from one of the upper windows of the house. Drudge, son of a bitch, hot water. Coming, sir, said Drudge, rising very deliberately from his knees and giving a finishing pat to his heap of dust. I shall be leaving here soon, he continued to John. I am thinking of going further north. Further north? Yes, sir. There are openings with Mr. Savage up in the mountains. I was wondering if you and Mr. Virtue were going that way. Drudge, bellowed Mr. Sensible's voice from the house. Coming, sir, said Drudge, beginning to untie 2 pieces of string with which he had confined his trousers beneath his knees. So you see, Mr. John, I should be greatly obliged if you would allow me to travel with you. Drudge, am I to call again? Shouted Mr. Sensible. Coming, sir, if you was to agree, I would give Mr. Sensible notice this morning. We are certainly not going north for a bit, said John, and I should have no objection provided Mr. Virtue agrees. The very kind of you, I am sure, sir, said Drudge. Then he turned and walked slowly into the house. Chapter 7. The gaucherie of virtue. Mr. Sensible was not in a good humor when they met at breakfast. That ungrateful blockhead of a servant of mine is leaving me in the lurch, he said, and for the next few days we must shift for ourselves. I fear I am a wretched cook. Perhaps, Virtue, you would indulge me so far as to take the cooking on yourself until I get a new man. I dare say you can enable the 3 of us to live a very, very tolerable sort of picnic life for 3 days. The 2 young men informed him that they were continuing their journey after breakfast. This, said Mr. Sensible, is getting really serious. Do you mean to say that you are going to desert me? I am to be reduced to absolute solitude, deprived of the common decencies of life, compelled to spend my day in menial offices? Well, sir, I am unacquainted with modern manners. No doubt this is the way in which young men now return hospitality. I beg your pardon, sir, said Virtue. I had not seen it in that light. I will certainly act as your servant for a day or so if you wish it. I had not understood that it would be such a burden to you to cook for yourself. I don't remember that you said anything about servants when you were outlining the good life last night. Why, sir, said Mr. Sensible, when I outline the principles of the steam engine, I do not explicitly state that I expect fire to burn or the laws of gravity to operate. There are certain things that one always takes for granted. When I speak of the art of life, I presuppose the ordinary conditions of life which that art utilizes, such as wealth, said Virtue, a competence, said Mr. Sensible, and health too, said Virtue. Moderate health, said Mr. Sensible. Your art, then, said Virtue, seems to teach men that the best way of being happy is to enjoy unbroken good fortune in every respect. They would not all find the advice helpful. And now, if Drudge will show me his scullery, I will wash up the breakfast things. You may save yourself the trouble, sir, said Mr. Sensible dryly. I cannot pretend to your intensity, and I do not choose to be lectured at the breakfast table. When you have mixed more with the world, you will learn not to turn the social board into a schoolroom. In the meantime, forgive me if I feel that I should find your continued society a little fatiguing. Conversation should be like the bee which darts to the next flower before the last has ceased swaying from its airy visit. You make it more like a wood beetle eating its way through a table. As you wish, said Virtue, but how will you do? I shall shut up the house, said Mr. Sensible, and practice in a hotel until I have fitted this place up with such mechanical devices as will henceforth render me wholly independent. I see that I have let myself get behind the times. I should have listened more to certain good friends of mine in the city of Claptrap who have kept abreast of modern invention. They assure me that the machinery will soon put the good life beyond the reach of chance, and if mechanism alone will not do it, I know a eugenist who promises to breed us a race of peons who will be psychologically incapable of playing me a trick like this of Drudge's. So it felt out that all 4 left the house together. Mr. Sensible was astonished to find Drudge, who parted from his employer very civilly, was accompanying the young men. He only shrugged his shoulders, however, and said, Vive la bagatelle. You have stayed in my house, which is called the Lima, and its motto is do what you will. So many men, so many minds. I hope I can tolerate anything except intolerance. Then he went his way, and they saw him no more. So then we're going to be going on tomorrow with book 6. We are here on Wednesday, hump day on our 3 days on. It is December 3rd. It is day 280 in the classroom, and we are reading by Clive Staples Lewis. We are reading The Pilgrim's Regress. Thanks so much for joining me. I don't have the book in my hand yet because I'm not going to attempt to go down those icy stairs. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll be back here tomorrow with book 6. I have to say something about healthy mind, body, spirit. So that's basically it.